there was a lot of Alien movie call outs here. The
Yes.
Sigourney Weaver call out, the shout out rather, that you mentioned. So
Hmm.
it was great. I want to say this is 98. So we're 2 years removed
98.
from Independence Day, and we're mentioning Independence Day in this movie.
Yes.
Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak,
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
and we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel. Yeah,
Well, here we are.
here we are.
It is October 2024. It is spooky season. So we are continuing on with our breakdowns here. So let's get started.
Yes.
This next movie was directed by Robert Rodriguez. Excellent filmography.
Yes.
Released December the 25th, Christmas Day of 1998. Today, the Panel Bros are going to be doing a breakdown for The Faculty.
Yes. This is arguably one of my favorite experiences growing up as a kid, going to the theater to see with my dad. You already know we've talked about it in the past. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1978, is one of my favorite horror movies. And the idea that we got to take that story element and put it in a high school when I was in school, I just thought that was so awesome and so cool to see. So I couldn't wait to rewatch it. I watch it every year. It's part of my Halloween rotation. I watch it every year for my spooky season. And again, you know me as a huge sci-fi guy, so we get to mix that horror and that sci-fi, put them together. And that's all me.
Yeah, and you could tell Rodriguez was going after the younger demographic, even though this was a rated R movie.
Oh
But
yeah, dude.
he was going for the younger demographic when he made this.
Hmm.
But I think this is just the ongoing theme from the movies we're doing breakdowns for. These are all horror, but they
Hmm.
are different types of horror. So this one probably being sci-fi, a sci-fi horror movie, but it touches on a few other things that we'll get into
Oh
as
yeah.
we do our breakdown here. So. Alrighty, let's get started on the plot here. So we do have our opening scene here. It is a football practice. We have the coach yelling. Um, Offspring is playing. Uh, we see the broken sprinkler. Coach is trying to fix it. He's visited by a mystery person. So one evening at Harrington High School in Ohio, teachers and Principal Drake leave after discussing the school's budget. When Drake returns and retrieves her keys, she's attacked by the school's football coach, Joe Willis, played by
Yes.
Robert Patrick.
Amazing choice.
Yeah. So he stabs her through the hand with a pencil,
Hmm.
and he says, "I always wanted to do that."
Yes.
And so she's trying to get away from him at this point. She does get away from him, and the drama teacher supposedly saves her. And when she turns around, drama teacher Mrs. Olson emotionlessly stabs Drake with scissors as she tries to flee the school. And then Mrs. Olson says, "I always wanted to do that." All
Yes.
while the coach is looking on, and then we get our title card.
What a cold open. Like this, and I remember it where I felt like this went from 0 to 100 very fast. You have the great Robert Patrick playing the coach, and he's talking to her in the office, and she thinks he's drunk because he just walks in and goes, "You look very pretty tonight," and she's like, "All right, coach, you had a little too much to drink," and he keeps pestering her about a pencil. Do you have a pencil? Do you have a pencil? And she's like, "Go home. This is borderline harassment." And he's like, "I just really need a pencil." And she's like, "Fine." And she gives him a pencil, and he pushes it through her hand. And right off the bat, we're like, "All right, we're in it." And she fights back. She puts her keys in her hand, cuts his face, runs. Mrs. Olson, played by this sweet lady, is just like, like, where are your keys? Like, you're falling for it. Like, I fell for it. And she's able to get her out. And like you said, all of a sudden, Mrs. Olson just goes extremely cold and emotionless. And she grabs the scissors. She takes her out right in front of the coach. And just like the coach says the words, "I've always wanted to do that." And it was at this moment I was already trying to dissect what these parasites really do. And we'll explore more as the movie goes on. But from this moment, when they said I've always wanted to do that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. That was interesting. So is this internally something that their former selves did want to do? Maybe not as extreme, but maybe they didn't like her, and the parasite is working on those emotions. I don't know, but it's an interesting concept that we'll discuss as the movie goes on. But what a cold open!
So the following morning, the students arrive, including Casey Connor, the dedicated but perpetually harassed photographer for the school newspaper, played by Elijah Wood.
Yes.
Casey is the underappreciated assistant to spiteful Delilah Prophet, Jordana Brewster, the
Mhm.
paper's editor-in-chief and head cheerleader. Delilah's mistreated boyfriend, Stan Rosato, is contemplating quitting the football team to pursue academics. We have Zeke Tyler is an intelligent yet rebellious student repeating his senior year.
Mhm.
I want to say a breakout role for Josh Hartnett, maybe.
Yes,
Yeah.
if I put money on it, this was the first time I really saw him in a movie where everyone was kind of talking about him after. Like I remember all my female friends were like, "Oh, that Josh Hartnett guy." I feel like this is
Yeah.
when he really started to blow up and movies started lining up shortly after.
So Zeke sells, among other illegal items, a powdery ecstasy-like drug he distributes hidden in ballpoint pens. So you can get from the plot here, we're kind of dating ourselves here when the movie
Mhm.
came out. It says ecstasy-like drugs. So yeah, we're talking about the late 90s here for sure.
Oh yeah. Yep.
We do get a snapshot of the faculty room. Before we move on here, um, uh, Delilah, she has like conversations here, and it's almost
Mhm.
like she's narrating the movie as
Yeah.
we're going along here. Like she talks about the social order, about who people are and such. So I just wanted to point that out. I noticed that.
Yeah, and we're gonna every character gets their own little introduction. We start to learn a little bit about these characters, and there's something about these characters I'll talk about more as the movie continues.
So we do get a snapshot of the faculty room. Coach is planted by the water cooler. He's drinking his water, and one of the others says, "What's up, Coach?" And they're like, "He's thirsty." Probably a
Mhm.
pregame ritual, just little thing there.
Mhm.
He is confronted by teacher Elizabeth Burke, who expresses concern for him. Um, oh, I'm so sorry. We're moving back to Drake, uh, not Drake, Zeke, who is
Mhm.
confronted by teacher Elizabeth Burke, who expresses concern for him over his illegal activities. And yeah, uh, naive transfer student Mary Beth Louise Hutchinson befriends self-styled outcast Stokely Mitchell, who has deliberately spread rumors that she's a lesbian, though she has a crush on Stan. So she's telling everybody that she is a lesbian, even though
Mhm.
she's not, just to keep people off her back, basically.
Yeah,
Um,
this is what I liked about the beginning of the movie is that right away we're learning a lot about these characters in the sense that they're kind of pretending to be different people, which is ironic in a movie about alien parasites taking over people and taking over who they are to quote unquote make them better and whatnot. And you have Stokely, who's one of my favorite characters in the movie. She wears all black. She started this false rumor that she's gay so people would leave her alone. She's pretending to be something that she's not, and obviously you have Delilah, who's this social order, the head cheerleader, which you expect is always going to be this sweetheart and this angel who actually has a pretty nasty side to her. And you start to see that through the characters as we keep going with these characters. You learn a little bit about themselves, where it's almost like they're pretending to be different people, and I like that aspect of the movie, and we'll discuss each character more as they make the choices that they make.
oh yeah. So the new student, Mary Beth, she develops a crush on Zeke, which is reciprocated back.
Hmm.
So we have a moment here. We move forward a little bit between Casey and the coach, and he just sees him there, and whatever. The coach just approaches him. What are you doing out here? Oh, it's all right. I'm getting out of the way here, and he asks him if he wants to play, and he's like, "No, that's not for me. I don't think a person should run unless he's being chased." And the coach says, "I like that," you know,
Yeah.
and I put down here Robert Patrick is mustache twirling his way through this movie.
Bro, this whole movie, Robert is doing exactly that. The way he delivers his lines, the way he looks at other characters in the movie, just twirling the whole time, just twirling his mustache the whole time. Like, yeah, I am a bad guy. Like, there's
Right.
something about me that's off. You guys don't know it yet. You as in the characters, but everyone else here knows there's something different about me.
Casey finds a strange creature on the football field and takes it to science teacher Mr. Furlong, played by Jon Stewart.
Yes.
And he believes it is a new species of a cephalopod specific parasite called a mesozoon. So here we go here before we move on. So this is the scene we're at here.
Mm-hmm.
And some water spills on it, and it starts moving.
Yeah.
So Furlong drops it into a tank, and then you see it start moving again. It sprouts antenna, legs. It even replicates itself. It's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
So Furlong, the intelligent person in the room, the teacher, sticks his hand in there after seeing all this. And guess what? He gets bit. Shocker, right?
Yep. He puts his hand in there with a species that he's never seen before. Yeah. And he even tells Casey, I think you've discovered a new species. I don't, want to blow smoke up your butt. And they kind of laugh it off. He's like, no, new species are discovered every day. So when he puts it in the water and he sees the dynamics change, he goes, oh, I noticed that, its skin is different. I'm going to touch it. And I was like, why? Like what at what point is that a good idea, man? And he puts his hand in there and he gets distracted because it replicates itself, which is very unnatural.
Right.
And he kind of just loses track and it bites him on the finger and you just see lots of blood and he freaks out and he's like, oh, I'm okay. And Casey asks a good question. He goes, it has teeth. Where did it get teeth?
Right.
Just they're like,
So we then have a scene where Mrs. Brummel walks into the showers while Stan is in there, acting very strangely. She reaches to Stan for help, and when he pulls away, he pulls out a chunk of her hair and her scalp on top of everything. It's explained by her being treated for cancer and on medication. That's how they're explaining this to Stan. Don't worry about her. This is what she's going through right now.
Mm-hmm.
While this is being explained to Stan and Casey catches Coach standing in the middle of the sprinklers, staring right back at him.
Just absorbing all the water, just the arms folded, and just showering in the sprinkler system,
right.
Which that in itself is not normal.
No.
Like the coach is just standing there, getting wet by the sprinklers, and just folded up, zero motion, just staring, locked right ahead.
Yeah. Moving forward here, Delilah and Casey hide in the teacher's lounge to find a story because they're just trying to find something out, Accidentally, they witness Coach Willis and Miss Olson forcing one of the parasites into the ear of the school nurse, played by Salma Hayek.
Yes.
They also find the body of the other teacher, Mrs. Brummel, in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
They get caught, and then they flee. Casey and Delilah do. Casey calls the police, but his claims are dismissed. So
this whole situation, when you see her in the closet, she is completely like void of any more. She is dry. It's almost like a dried up raisin, and she falls over and you're like, oh, that's where her body is. First of all, the scene where they shoot the parasite into the nurse's ear, I remember watching it the first time and being like, oh crap, like, because it's scary, man. Like they grab her, they put her on the couch, they turn her head sideways, and the coach's eyes roll back and turn completely white. And you start seeing the veins coming up through the head, opens the mouth, shoots it out his mouth into her ear, and you just get blood splatter. And it's like, that was intense. And then once they get out, because they do make it out of nowhere, shows up Principal Drake, who we saw get massacred in the cold open.
Right.
Who even the other teachers were like, anybody know where Principal Drake is? And I'm like, oh, she's probably homesick or doing this or whatever. She finally shows back up. So when she shows up, you're like, oh, she's in on this. And
Right.
obviously there's like this moment of like, okay, how many do they have? Like, are other teachers getting that we haven't seen yet? But we know for sure that she's one of them.
So the next day, we see the teachers and staff acting strangely, getting information about the students' families and infecting them through ear exams in the nurse's office. Slowly, the students all begin to act strange in a way that mimics the teachers.
Oh yeah.
So,
There's a scene here that I really enjoyed, and it's small. Mr. Tate. Mr. Tate is the one that's asking for the family tree from all the families.
yeah,
He was like, you're going to write your family tree, you're going to do some. And what was interesting about it, and it's a small tidbit, is he's drinking a bottle of water. Mr. Tate was the teacher with alcoholism. And throughout the movie, you see him either sprinkling alcohol into his mug, drinking the mug in class, not caring. And now he's drinking water. And again, it's one of those things that ties into the whole idea of we've seen water play already. We've seen the coach guzzle cups of water. We've seen him stand up sprinkler system. And now we've seen Mr. Tate completely abandon the alcohol to drink only water. And we'll figure out why. But it's a cool little like a little note that I enjoyed, being like, oh, okay, like no more alcohol. It has to be water.
yeah. And poor Casey, the police come and they go into the closet and there's a dummy in there, and then it's just like, oh, we're fine, and you see the nurse here, you're like, oh, I'm fine, everything's okay,
Yep.
and
It's not looking good.
right, and then his parents don't believe him, and but then it gets even more serious as the movie moves along later on. It starts expanding beyond the staff and the students.
Oh yeah,
Um,
because in this moment, the principal takes the police officer into the office
right.
because Casey is adamant. He's like, call Delilah. Call Delilah. She was there. She saw. And they're like, we tried to call her. We can't reach her. When the first time I heard that, I was like, uh-oh. I was like, what happened to Delilah? And she goes, oh, we can go to my office, make a call. You can talk to the nurse if you like. And he goes into the office and you hear like a shuffle. Like you hear it. You hear a shuffle and he comes out. And when the police officer comes out, he kind of just looks at Casey and he kind of gives him like a little nod.
Right.
And Casey's like in a low whisper, they got him. Like he knows, like he knows. And it's a scary thing because like you said, now it's going to spread beyond the school. And my first instinct was like, oh, the whole police station's done now. I was like, he's going to go back to the squad, go to the station. I'm like, yep. They're moving out of the school.
So the next day, Casey gets in touch with Delilah and he tells her his theory. And he says, everybody's been acting really strange, especially the faculty.
Yes, the faculty. You gotta drop it in there, man.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a name for that, but yes, he said it. He said the name of the movie in the movie.
Because I'll be real with you, bro. When I was going to high school, I never referred to my teachers as the faculty. Like it wasn't a term. So I pop for things like that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like, oh, look, everyone's strange, especially the faculty. And it's in Delilah. Look, I started questioning Delilah a little bit because she comes in and she's wearing glasses.
Right.
She's not wearing hair products, and I'm like,
right.
But we'll see.
She's incognito.
Yep, and that's what she said. She goes, I'm incognito, because he's like, what are you wearing? And she said, you think I want to wear this? I'm incognito. They're after me. And I was like, oh boy.
Yeah. So he tells it to the rest of them, Stan and Stokely as well, that he believes the teachers are being controlled by aliens. So they're all getting together and he's trying to talk them into this theory, so to speak.
Yes.
And while they're all talking, Casey drops another line while they are exploring his theory. This is one of your favorite lines. Your favorite line of the movie.
Absolute favorite line in the movie.
If you were going to take over the world, would you blow up the White House, Independence Day style, or sneak in through the back door? Wow.
That is an iconic line because I've had this conversation when I was a kid where we would randomly talk with your friends of like, oh, what do you think if aliens exist? How would they do it? How would they do that? And I remember having conversations when I was as young as like 15. They'd be like, oh, they would send a virus. Oh, they would sneak in. So when I heard this in the movie, it shakes Stan too, because Stan is kind of like mocking the idea that this could even exist, and Stokely's too. They're kind of just like, what, you know what I mean? And Stan is like, okay, let's say aliens for a second. Hypothetically, aliens are taking over. Why Ohio? Why here? And
Right.
Casey drops that line, and Stan just kind of pauses because it's like, I mean, that actually does make kind of sense. Like, if you were going to take over, would you want to showcase? Would you want a war, or would you want to sneak in through the back door? And I'm like,
Right.
oh, that's such a good line.
And it wouldn't be the only time we get a shout out to other alien movies, which good
Mhm.
on Robert Rodriguez for doing that.
I loved it. Yep.
Obviously, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, they mentioned
Mhm.
that. They mentioned Independence Day, and they mentioned Men in Black. So
Men
they
in
mentioned
Black,
other
Puppet
90s.
Masters. Like, there's a lot,
Yeah.
and here's why that's such a good thing, is because by not mentioning it, you're going to get people who watch this who will compare. They're going to compare anyway. They're going to be like, oh, it was, they did stuff from Invasion of Body Snatchers. They did something from um Puppet Master. They did stuff from here, but the movie does it for you. So the movie does it, and you're like, oh, it's cool that they acknowledge those things. So it's not, so people don't necessarily feel like, oh, they're just copying or taking
Right.
topics. They're like, no, they're using those movies to help explain what's happening to them
Rodriguez is
within the
letting
movie.
you know, oh, yeah, we know what this
We
reminds you
know,
of, and
like
I'm going to
we
tell
know,
you.
yeah, and I think that's so great when people do that.
So this is where things really escalate.
Mm-hmm.
So after Zeke and Mary Beth tease them about their theory, Mr. Furlong attempts to infect them, and there's an impending scuffle. We get this great shot here with Zeke pulling the
Yeah,
paper cutter
bro,
blade
what a
out.
weapon!
Yeah,
What
he
a
gets this
weapon!
like machete looking like thing.
Listen,
Um,
whoo, I never would have imagined to do that, and I was like, that's okay.
yeah. Mr. Furlong attempts to inject them, and Zeke injects his homemade drugs into Furlong's eye, and which ends up killing him. This is a scene where Josh Hartnett just kind of becomes an action star. Like
Yeah.
in the one moment, he holds up the blade after doing this, and it was like, oh wow, look that this kid's got something special.
This was the scene, and it was so funny because Zeke comes in, and Zeke is kind of a douchebag in the scene because he comes in and he's mocking Casey, and he's like, oh, and he's crouched over, and he goes, Casey, the only person who's an alien around here is you. And Casey doesn't take anything from anybody. Casey may be what we'd consider a nerd, but Casey doesn't take it, and Casey lets him have it right back. Mr. Furlong walks in, and Zeke's just like, oh, he thinks you're an alien. And you would think that Mr. Furlong would laugh it off,
Nope.
kind of like, really? Casey, come on. Like, you guys come up with the craziest ideas. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Casey, can you stay over and help me work on something? But no, he shuts the door and is ready to throw down with all these kids. Like, he's ready. He's like, nope. Casey, he closes the blinds and goes on a full. Zeke is ready to leave, and he grabs Zeke and he goes, this would be all over quickly if you just sit down. And he throws him. They get into this scuffle, this fight. He throws Zeke through the water tank, the fish tank. He throws him through it. You got the whole sequence with the paper cutter. First of all, we probably shouldn't have had paper cutters in grade school in our
Probably not.
classes.
No.
These things were extremely dangerous. This was
Oh,
a
yeah.
full-on heavy blade. So when he rips it off, again, very just like ready to go down, he cuts off the fingers of Furlong. And I got to give a shout out to the effects team because he cut off the fingers.
Right.
And so he's got just like the nubs of the knuckle. And out of it are the tendons from the alien just coming out like this the entire time. And it looks so cool because it's trying to get Zeke and whatnot. And it's a really good sequence. And yep, he sticks the pen in his eye, starts to boil acid up a little bit. Jon Stewart gives us a nice noise and just like falls over the counter. And Stan is like, Zeke. And again, action hero shot. He tosses him the blade. He catches it very nonchalantly, gets ready to stand over. He's gone. And Stan says it, goes, drop a profanity, effing aliens are taking over the school. Like they
Right.
just we're in it.
So Zeke takes the five to his house, uh, where he experiments on a specimen retrieved by Casey. I want to say this is where they started seeing like the police starting to block off the streets.
Yes, this is when you start to notice, okay, it's not just a school because they're ready to bail town. Like they're just ready to go. And when you go, you see the blockades and the barricades, and it's like, oh no. And he's like, all right, we're going to my house. Also, I thought it was really cool that Zeke's house is a very nice house.
Yeah.
Again, we talked about it earlier. We talk about these characters pretending to be something that they're not. And Zeke puts on this I don't care attitude and whatever, but he's actually quite brilliant. He cares about his he cares about academic. He does care.
That's great.
He learns the material, and you go to his house, and you would expect Zeke to be in a very low income level house because he just doesn't put any effort or care into himself. And it's this like beautiful home. And you're like, oh, this is who you are. And it's a fun little aspect. And then we get to go see his lab because he's kind of a genius.
Yeah. So we had him experimenting on this specimen, and he discovers it needs water to survive, and it could be killed by his quote unquote drug, revealed to be raw powdered caffeine. Caffeine acts to dehydrate the user, and the aliens are hypersensitive to hydration of both themselves and their host. So we get this intense scene here. Zeke makes everyone take his drug to prove they're uninfected. And so one at a time, they're just like, through the pens, it's a unique choice that he used the pens to distribute his drug, so to speak.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting choice. And then this was the way they took it. So one by one, it comes down to Mary Beth and Delilah. They both take it at the same time, and then immediately Delilah draws back, and it's revealed she's infected. She destroys Zeke's lab and most of his drug supply before escaping.
This sequence, all right, this is our homage to The Thing, where everyone tests themselves. And I like this scene because they're pointing out what a viewer is pointing out, that they're all acting somewhat different, and they're not actually being different. They're acting more themselves, but they've been hiding behind a fake persona that now that they're actually seeing who they really are, they're kind of like, well, this isn't you. Like, Delilah looks at Stokely and she goes, when did you start liking boys? She goes, what are you talking about? She goes, I see the way you look at Stan. You know what I mean? Because Stokely is letting her guard down. It's very hard for you to not notice that Stokely has a thing for Stan, whether it's their conversations or the way she looks at him. They start talking to Stan. They're like, Stan, when did you all care about being all academic? Like, what is this? Like, you're a football star. You're this, you're that, but now you want to do this? And, they're talking about Delilah. They're like, oh, you haven't been without contacts or hairspray since birth. You know what I mean? And one of my favorite lines is they got really nothing on Casey. And she just goes, and Casey, when did you become Sigourney Weaver? And it's so funny because Casey is essentially who Casey is. Like, and it's just this idea that Casey is pushing forward. It's like, okay, we have to do this. We have to do that. He's kind of taking a leadership charge to a degree. When did you become Sigourney Weaver? And it's a great scene. And then they point out how Mary Beth is very new. She just moved into Ohio, and the moment she moved in, all this stuff started happening. And the drug scene is very interesting because Mary Beth makes a point known like earlier in the movie, like when her and Zeke are in like a lab taking equipment, he brings it up and she goes, oh, I'm allergic to aspirin. This would probably kill me.
Right.
So when they get to the testing scene, that's brought back up and everyone's taking the test. And when it comes to Mary Beth and Delilah, Mary Beth's like, I can't. Like, this could kill me. Like, I can't. And it's like, you have to take it. And they both take it. Well, I don't think Delilah takes it. I think Delilah comes close and immediately because she throws it away, and she panics.
Right.
And there's a really cool moment, and we'll talk about it when we wrap the discussion, where she goes, "I don't know what's wrong with me," and I was like, it's that conversation of like, is the parasite essentially putting her in almost like a dreamlike state where she doesn't even know she's being controlled? Because she goes, I don't know what's wrong with me. Then her eyes flip back.
Right.
And then she goes, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get away. Like, we're everywhere. And it's like, oh man. And she goes full scary. But she looks at herself and she sees her skin change. And she goes, I don't know what's wrong with me. What's happening to me? And I was like, is she still putting up the act? Or is this like one of those things where, like, I don't know, her brain is telling her, like, no, you are still Delilah, and she's not. It's a good line because it makes you question whether or not she was aware or not. But either way, once her eyes roll back, she's full on, and we get another funny scene because Casey has the gun, and Zeke is like, shoot her, Casey, shoot her in the head, shoot her. And everyone's yelling at Casey to shoot her, and he can't do it. And Stokely just takes the gun because she hates Delilah and goes, I'll effing shoot her. And she just grabs it and starts opening shots and shots and shots.
Right.
But Delilah is still a pain in the butt, and she destroys the whole lab.
Yeah. So, acting on Stokely's speculation that killing the alien queen will revert everyone to normal, that's the theory they have, the group returns to the school where their football team is playing and infecting opposing players.
Yeah.
So, basically the out-of-towners, so it can spread from town to town. That's what they're trying to do. Believing Principal Drake to be the queen, they isolate her in the gym and fatally shoot her. They dump the caffeine powder on her too.
Oh yeah.
You know, so she ain't
This
coming back.
This is a good scene because, again, Stokely had brought it up and Stan had brought it up earlier in the movie, where Invasion of the Body Snatchers, one way that you could tell that people were taken over by the alien pods was they were emotionless. And Stan had mentioned, like, no, the coach had emotion, and everyone is still able to put on this emotion. So this is a really good scene because they think she's the leader. And when Casey and them are having a hard time of not knowing what to do with her, whether they're going to shoot her because she won't take the drug, they're like, oh, we'll put it in her eye and it's instantaneous. And she goes, Casey, are you on drugs? But there's panic in her voice. There's real fear. She's like, Casey,
Right.
Casey, are you on drugs? And it's a great moment because it shows you how manipulative they can be. Where, again, in a movie like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it's very easy to tell. They're very just, they're this. But in a world like this, where they actually can blend in, sound like us, look like us, put emotion into it, it's a great sequence. And we have another situation where Zeke is like, I'll do it. And Zeke shoots her once in the forehead. She falls and nothing happens. And they're kind of just like, guys, did we make a mistake? And no, we get a Robert Rodriguez jump scare, and she jumps up into the screen, and all the creatures and stuff are coming out of her head. And Mary Beth just says, hey, man, you're taking all of this. And she dumps all of it. And Zeke is like, is that it? And she's like, yep. And, you know, Principal is no more. She just completely melts. Like, just, there's nothing left of Principal.
Stan confronts the coach and team to see if the plan worked, but becomes infected himself. So this is where they find out that Principal Drake was not the queen. Zeke and Casey retrieve more of Zeke's drugs from his car, so he still has a little bit left. Casey leads infected students away from Zeke, who encounters Miss Burke in the parking lot and incapacitates her. So, yeah.
The stuff with Miss Burke.
Yeah.
Huge crush on her as a kid, by the way.
Emke Jansen.
Shout out. God. Huge crush on her as a kid. So when she was in the movie, I was so happy because I didn't know she was in the movie till I saw it. I don't remember her from the trailers as much as I do the main cast. So the great thing about her character in the movie is that when we first meet her, she's this sweet, innocent, very soft-spoken character. She's trying so hard. She's like, if anybody knows the answer, could you, like that, And by the time we see her taking over, she's just like this confident, very strong-willed person. And she comes up on Zeke, and Zeke knows he's in trouble, man. Like, he knows. And she's just like, she does a callback to something earlier, and it's very sexual in nature. Where, again, earlier in the movie, where she was kind of coming up to him about like doing illegal stuff in his car. One of the things that he did that I thought was extremely rude of Zeke was he offered cherry flavored condoms. Is it the cherry flavored? And she was just like, that's so rude. And I was like, yeah, dude, that was really rude. And she comes around here and she goes, I'm in the mood for something, cherry flavored. And she's trying to seduce him. She's trying to seduce him. And I'm like, dude, like, I don't know, man. that woman is gorgeous. Maybe going to Alien for a little bit ain't bad. But this is the scene where, she's going after Zeke full body, and we get a really awesome sequence here.
Yeah, so the car crashes, and for lack of a better term, she gets decapitated.
Yup.
And the way that they did it, this has to be a shout out to The Thing. Just the
Yes.
way the head was crawling around and everything.
Yep.
And then to add some flair to the moment, we see her body. I
Yep.
guess it's like looking for the head, but then she and instead of shooting, he's like, no.
This was another great moment because he's completely checked out. He was
Yeah.
like, nah, man, F this, and he runs away. And the sequence was so cool because she jumps into the car, like he goes, let me hook you up, because he needs those pens, man. He needs those pens of the sky.
Right.
Excuse me. So he gets into the car, she breaks in, he's driving around the parking lot, just swerving and swerving, trying to get her off of him. And he sees the bus, and I was like, oh, here it comes. And he puts his seatbelt on,
Yep.
hits head on. She goes flying out the windshield, dude. And like you said, this was absolutely an homage to The Thing, in my opinion, because they're almost operating under the same rules of The Thing. If you remember, each cell is its own organism. So if an arm falls off, it can be its own thing. If a leg falls off, it could be in its own thing. So the fact that her head fell off and it has these tentacles and it's crawling and the body's still able to maneuver and function, I was like, oh man, they're doing The Thing like The Thing. When Furlong's fingers get cut off, they all start crawling around. So I did like the aspect of them doing the head thing. Now, what would have been a great callback, and maybe it's too on the nose, so maybe that's why they didn't do it. Him seeing the head, if he would have delivered that same line from The Thing where he goes, you gotta be effing kidding, like that would have been like the tie. But we didn't need it. It was enough. But seeing a head on its own crawling back to a body, he was like, out of here.
Yeah, well, we had to wait a few more decades before we got the It movies.
Yes, and then we got it again.
I believe that happened, right?
Absolutely. Yep. They were like, we're putting it in there, and it was awesome.
Yeah. So we move on here to our next moment here. We're here at the gym, and just through a conversation, there's no more hiding. Mary Beth reveals herself to be the alien queen. And earlier on, she faked taking the drug. She revealed to Stokely like in a random conversation as they're standing on the bleachers. Like, all right, plot device. We're just going to move forward right now.
Yep. It was just like, here we go. And they're having this conversation. It's just her and Stokely. And she goes, Stan seemed kind of happy. And she goes, because it wasn't Stan. Like, that Stan is gone. And she's like, or maybe they just made him better. And I'm like, what is Mary Beth doing? Like, I'm like, is she giving up? Is this her way of giving up? And she goes, aren't you tired of being something you're not? And like the way I was like, oh no. And she decks Stokely, dude. Like she just punches her straight in the face, stands up, and you get the reveal of a tentacle arm. And Stokely's like, no effing way. And then Casey happens to come in and they see her change. And I want to give a huge shout out to the character design, because I love the character design for when Mary Beth reveals her queen form, because it's CGI when it needs to be, but that is a practical machine, man. That thing looks awesome on screen.
Yeah, so we see her change, and then the monster, the alien creature, they have this sequence in the pool, and obviously all that water is going to help the alien. But as Stokely escapes, we see a nice shot of the creature changing back into the human. Not bad for 1998.
Bro, yes.
I mean,
absolutely.
The CGI for the creature, a little shaky, but that one scene of the creature changing back into Mary Beth, that was a good shot.
It was very good because, again, it reminded me of Jurassic Park, where they had a practical animatronic when they could, and if they had anything really fast or quick, like when it runs, it's full CGI. Like it's full CGI, right. And you can tell. But when it's in the pool and it's like standing up in the water and it's just this giant practical, and I'm like, that looks incredible. And like Stokely gets dragged into the pool, grabs her by the leg, she falls, she pops her jaw really bad, almost knocks her out. And she's in the water, and you see this thing on her tail, dude. And Casey pulls her out, and you get that great shot that you just mentioned where she's the creature. And as she swims through the pool, she goes back into her human form, and you get the shadow still. Oh, chef's kiss. It looks so good.
So Casey and Stokely flee to the swimming pool, where Stokely is injured, but she becomes infected.
Yeah.
So Zeke and Casey hide in the locker room, where Mary Beth reverts back to her human disguise, as we stated. She explains she is taking over Earth because her planet is dying. So that's why they're there. Mary Beth, do you have something to add there about that? Because we're about to hit our climax.
Okay, yeah. So I thought it was cool that she kind of gives a little bit of exposition because she didn't have to. And I like the idea that she's like, this is why I came here. So instead of it being like this giant army of aliens, she goes, this is why I came here. So her planet was dying and she found Earth. We don't need to specify how she found us, but she found us. And she's just been, because she's all connected, taking over one by one by one by one. And I like the conversation that she's having here, and she's still trying to negotiate. She's still doing it like, it can be great. You can be you don't have to be the kid that has to hide. The jock can be the guy who's got great academic, like you guys could be all this great things. Like she's still trying to do this conversation piece, and it's awesome that she could probably take them out like that, but there's still this idea of like, no, you can still be part of the team. And I like that.
I want to give Rodriguez a shout out here for letting us know who the queen was before we should have known. Because when you think about it, the principal's the obvious choice because she's the leader. But he let us know already it's the new girl.
Yeah.
But we didn't suspect it because she seems so innocent. But why would I pick the obvious person of the principal when I could be the out of towner that no one's ever met before? So in a way, Rodriguez let us know. I let you know from the beginning. You could have figured it out who it was, but you didn't see it.
Like she's like Delilah says it. She goes, "You came into town. You're the new girl. No one knows anything about you, and all this stuff just starts happening." And it's like, yeah, it was right there, and we just assumed the principal.
Yeah. So Mary Beth transforms back into her true form of the alien and hurls Zeke across the room into the lockers, knocking him out. Casey seizes the drug and traps the queen behind retracting bleachers rather. Just as the queen infects him, which would mean we're done at that point, because there's no more hope. You could see the parasites, crawling around his face. He stabs the drug into her eye. Call back to when they first found out they could defeat them. And it's just enough because it was like a handful of them right into her eye.
He had a whole handful of these pens.
It ended up killing her and halting his infection. So all the parasites just left his face. And then, as they stated, if the queen dies, then everybody goes back to normal. And that's what starts happening little by little. Casey returns to the locker room and finds Stokely and Zeke alive. So we fast forward a little bit here. A month later, everyone has returned to normal. Stan and Stokely, who has shed her goth girl image, are now dating. And Zeke has taken Stan's place on the football team, while Miss Burke affectionately watches him during practice. Weird. Delilah, no longer vindictive, is now dating Casey, who is considered a local hero, as various news media reveal the attempted alien invasion is now public knowledge. Aliens exist, everybody.
Yep. They're like, yo, time man of the year. Casey helped defeat aliens.
Yeah. Even as the FBI denies this. And that's our movie. I wanted to bring up something because I've seen this argument online. This is about Stokely. Okay.
When we see Stokely at the end, she's wearing bright colors. She's wearing purple. And I remember and not long ago, like maybe like a year ago, 2 years, because faculty gets brought up every so often because it's one of those hits, right, that people just watch. And I've seen time and time again where people were upset that Stokely got rid of like the all black. They were like, oh, that was such a good look for her. Like, oh, I can't believe they put those pastel colors on Stokely and whatnot. And I've always like counter. I've always not argued, but like debated people. I'm like, yeah, but that wasn't Stokely. Like Stokely let us know from the gate that she wore those colors to hide. She didn't want to be noticed. And now for the first time, she's comfortable in her skin. It doesn't bother her to be seen anymore. And I'm like, that's the significance of the clothing. I get that she looks cooler in all black and the eyeliner. Yeah, like I get it. Because a lot of people feel like nobody wants to call it a phase, right? And it's not a phase for many people. But people often get told, especially in high schools, like, oh, it's a phase, you'll outgrow it. And they hate that. And as they should, because if that's who they are, that's who they are. So a lot of people see Stokely and they go, oh, she represents me. And I get that notion too. But the reality is within the context of the movie, her character specifically didn't want to be that. Now she gets to be herself, and that's cool.
So my initial thoughts upon this rewatch here were just, I felt as though this was like a love letter to Alien movies, Alien Takeover movies,
Yes.
specifically. But to your point, Rodriguez, he made sure to get it in there. There was a lot of Alien movie call outs here. The
Yes.
Sigourney Weaver call out, the shout out rather, that you mentioned. So it was great. I want to say this is 98. So we're 2 years removed
98.
from Independence Day, and we're mentioning Independence Day in this movie.
Yes.
So that was really cool. And I mentioned it before, like, just you didn't think it was the new girl, but Rodriguez was letting you know, hey, you should have caught that. This principle is too obvious. You should have caught that it was the new girl that acted so innocently. It's always, what did they say? It's always the quiet ones, right?
It's always and that's an interesting pull because, right, she's a new kid out of school, which should feel almost like complete fish out of water, right? Because the movie makes a point to show you what the school is like. It's very chaotic. Like, you got the bullies, you got the relationships where they're fighting each other, you got just fights because two cars are like, it's very chaotic. And you have Mary Beth, who's just very soft spoken, very just, like, hi, my name's Mary Beth, how are you, right?
But innocent.
She's very innocent. Yeah. So she immediately stands out. And not only that, Mary Beth, for a new girl, is very eager to make friends. Like, she attaches to Stokely first, which is interesting because she saw Stokely as someone who was hiding. She saw Stokely as a person who hides. So she's like, ooh, I'm going to get in with her. I'm going to show her what she could be. And she gets close to Zeke and this and that. And she's like, she's making her way through this group and whatnot. And it's a character trait. Like you said, like, Robert's kind of laying it out for us. But like many people, it's like, oh, okay, well, it's not her. She took the drug, you know what I mean? And everything else. She took out the principal. It's okay, but it's self-preservation. She's just trying to keep her identity as secret as possible. And like you said, man, I loved all the sci-fi nods to other movies, man. I'll Men in Black you, Sigourney Weaver, calling movies by name. Heck, they even go through the process of saying, Stokely, this is your area of expertise. How do we go about this? And they go, oh, well, in this movie, they were all attached. If you kill the queen, you kill them all. And they're like, we're functioning on that. There's a possibility that might not have worked, but they ran with it. And I thought that was great. And like you said, I do feel like Robert Rodriguez was making a love letter to those movies. And I feel like whenever you make a movie like this, because we have many Alien Takeover movies, we have a lot of them, there are always going to be comparisons. And I think when right off the bat as a fan, you can see they're a love letter, you tend to make less comparisons. You try not to go, well, this movie did it better. Independence Day did it better. That movie did it better. You tend not to do that because right from that moment, you understand that this is an homage. Like they're showing tribute to those movies. And as someone who loves those movies, that's a big win for me. And Robert Rodriguez, like, we've seen him do movies like Desperado and Mariachi, like very smaller scale movies before this. And this one felt like Robert Rodriguez got a little bit of money, and it was like, all right, we're gonna do some cool, really good practical effects, great cast. Because dude, this cast is solid, dude. We'll talk about this cast.
Yeah. So this does go on to become a cult classic, and once again, that probably means it didn't make a lot of money during its run. The budget was $15 million. It did make back a little bit, $63.2 million total as far as that goes. No major awards, but it was a box office success. But it definitely went on to become a big cult classic here. Let's give a little love to the cast.
Yeah.
So we have Jordana Brewster of the Fast and Furious movies as Delilah
Mm-hmm.
Prophet. We have Clea Duvall as Stokely Mitchell. And she's done a lot of other things since then, but I thought she
Mm-hmm.
would have been a lot bigger because, in
Yeah.
a way, there were two breakout roles in this movie. Josh Hartnett won, but I felt Clea Duvall could have been the other breakout role in this
Mm-hmm.
movie. You know, of course, Elijah Wood as Casey Connor. He goes on to do Lord of the Rings. Just to name one thing he goes on to do. We have Josh Hartnett as Zeke Tyler. Laura Harris as Mary Beth Hutchinson. We have Sean Hatosi as Stan Rosado. We have your girl, Salma Hayek, as Nurse Harper
Yeah.
at the height of her popularity in the 90s. We have Famke Janssen as Miss Burke, our very own uh, uh, Jean Grey.
Yes.
Jean Grey from the first X-Men trilogy there. We have, let's move down here. We have BB Newirth as Principal Drake. We have Robert Patrick as Coach Willis.
Yes.
We have John Stewart as Mr. Furlong, and the one and only Usher as Gabe.
Usher. They were like, listen, we want this young audience. We
Yeah.
want the MTV audience. They had a big deal with Tommy Hilfiger. I remember seeing all the Tommy Hilfiger ads with them. And then they were like, we're putting Usher. He's not going to have a big role, but we got Usher in here.
Yeah, and a lot of these actors, they were just up and comers at the time.
Mhm.
So to get all those actors, that's how you were able to afford it because they hadn't become who they would become eventually. You
Yeah.
know, so good on Robert Rodriguez, for having
Yeah.
an eye for all these up and comers, and
Oh, yeah.
it's like, hey, let's put them all in a movie together. Let's see what happens.
And it's great for these types of movies too, because then you don't feel like anybody's safe per se. You don't have any really big names that you're like, oh, well, this person can't turn or be infected or die in the movie, because like you said, they were still relatively on the rise. We didn't really know. I know when I saw this movie, I didn't know anybody besides oh god,
Elijah Wood,
Elijah
maybe.
Wood. There
Yeah.
was
He
at
he did a
this
lot of
time.
movies in the
Yeah,
90s.
at
Yeah.
this time in the early 90s, me being that age, he was the only one I was familiar with because I watched him when he was much younger. Like, he's been in movies his whole life. So
Right.
I knew him, The Good Son, you name it. I remember him from all these movies. Everyone else was still relatively new to me. So when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, I have no idea what's going to happen to anybody. And I like that feeling.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and when we're like, oh, he got the T1000,
Dude,
Yeah, he got the
listen,
T1000, so that was pretty cool. And then
I
Salma Hayek, she was in the mariachi movies, and then
Mhm.
she was in From Dusk Till Dawn, another Robert
Yes.
Rodriguez movie. So we recognize them, but they weren't the leads.
Yeah.
So he went with
And
younger.
that was cool. That was cool too, that you had these familiar faces, but they were only helping the new younger cast. Like, we're
Yeah,
focused on the younger
John
cast.
Stewart, like just
Yeah. That
so
it was so great because it felt like, and it wasn't, I don't think that's what it was. It wasn't like a passing of a torch, but you had these other actors that I knew well who they were. Well who they were, but they were only the supporting characters. They were supporting as the villains of the movie, and we had the kids that were taking front and center. And as a kid watching that, where it's based in high school, that was pretty awesome.
yeah. So I'm not to throw any shade to Laura Harris, who did an
Mhm.
incredible job as Mary Beth.
Mhm.
I already stated here, for me, the standouts are Josh Hartnett and Clea Duvall.
Yeah.
I thought that they were awesome in this
Mhm.
movie. How about you, as far as your
Yeah,
standouts?
I think Josh Hartnett was a huge standout. I think this was his role
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of
If
put
you
him
could
on
pick
the map.
one person, it's
Yep,
probably
it's Josh
Hartnett as
Hartnett.
Zeke. Yeah,
I remember, again, because I did not know who he was prior to this, and then after this, I was like, man, he's so cool, right? Like, I watched the movie, and I was like, oh, he's so cool, he's so BA. And I remember, like, when he got casted in Halloween H2O, I was like, oh, that's the guy from The Faculty. Like, that's how I remembered him at the time. As a young kid, I didn't know his name yet. I was like, that's the guy from The Faculty, and I started watching him make more and more movies, and it was always, oh, that's the guy from The Faculty. So I do think he was fantastic, and I think this was his big standout role, even though his haircut looked like it was cut by a weed whacker. I don't know what your boy was doing with that
right.
haircut, but that just goes to show you, even with a bad haircut, he killed it. And Clea Duvall as Stokely was awesome, because she was a great standout character too, because I feel like I feel like she was that character within the movie that I related to because she was the movie person. You know, like I like that about her. I was like, oh, she's the movie person. She's the sci-fi. She's into this. She's into that. And I also like the idea that like she was a rebel. Like she was a rebel. Like she didn't want to be around anybody. She kind of wanted to be her own thing for sad reasons. But I always thought that her character Stokely was pretty awesome, and she does a great job. And like you, I was hoping that she would, do a lot bigger things and whatnot. And I had seen her in movies afterwards. And again,
Right.
same thing with Josh Hartnett. When I saw her in a movie afterwards, I was like, oh, that's Stokely. Oh, I know her. That's Stokely from The Faculty. So I thought they both did great. But as we mentioned, Josh Hartnett is like the standout. Like he's the guy.
Yeah, I mean, and I have her IMDb up. I mean, she did a lot of stuff in the '90s and
Yeah.
early 2000s.
Yeah.
She's all that. The Astronaut's Wife. She was in Girl
Mm-hmm.
Interrupted.
Yeah.
Um, what else here? I'm just scrolling through here. She was in Identity.
I remember
There,
that's where I saw her
there's a
next.
shout. There's a shout.
Oh, I love that movie.
Oh
That's the
yeah,
movie so that came out in 2003. So
yeah,
I believe that was the very next movie that I saw her in, and I was really excited to see her. And I was like, yes, we got
yeah,
another
and
role for Stokely.
yeah. I mean, all right. So now that I'm looking at it, she did go on to do a lot of great things,
Mhm.
but rarely the lead. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, rarely the lead. So that's as far as that goes. So we're gonna start winding things down here with our closing thoughts. So I wanted to use this time just to give some love to Robert Rodriguez because
Yes.
he's had an incredible career, but a lot of it has been horror or horror adjacent.
Hmm.
And well, obviously we have From Dusk Till Dawn, we have the mariachi movies, um, Desperado, Once Upon a Time in Mexico, El Mariachi, and then we have the Spy Kids movies. Um,
Hmm.
I think he did a one half of Grindhouse, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
You
He
know,
did he did Planet Terror.
yeah. So, very full career, very full career. Oh, of course, you and I enjoy Alita, Battle Angel.
Where's the sequel,
Yes,
guys?
we want a sequel.
Bring it back. Run
Yes.
it.
But The Faculty, it's a Robert Rodriguez. Excuse me, it is a Robert Rodriguez film from beginning to end.
Mhm.
There's horror, there's comedy. There's a lot of
Yes.
comedy.
Yes.
There's some practical effects, as you put it. Um, there's science fiction. Uh,
Mhm.
s- uh, so he went along with the science fiction, and then I guess can we say a little bit of a body horror too?
Oh
A little
yeah,
bit,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
think so. I
a
think
little bit
so.
of body horror too. So
Yeah.
when we talk about these movies, quote unquote horror, it's just this is another great example of how horror just doesn't have to be one thing.
It's not locked into a box, and that's what's so great. I'm a Robert Rodriguez guy. I've been a Robert Rodriguez guy as long as I can remember. I think the first movie I saw from Robert Rodriguez was Desperado when I was a kid, and then I went into the rest of his filmography. And one thing I love about Robert Rodriguez is on almost all the movies that he makes, he has on the DVDs or Blu-rays. He always had a section called Robert Rodriguez Film School, and he would always break down how he did some of the scenes for the movie, and he was always adamant about he always believed you can get a lot done with very little, and his mentality was always like, I'm always going to try to do the effects, make the movie, and spend as little as possible to let you know that whoever's watching this, that you can make this. You don't need this grand budget. And I've always really loved Robert for that. And I would watch his Robert Rodriguez Film School videos and be like, oh, that's how he did. That's great. So when he got to do The Faculty, I remember thinking like, oh, this feels bigger. Like this feels like a bigger movie. I'm used to him doing, again, movies like Desperado that are very small scale, and this felt somewhat bigger but not too big. He made an alien invasion movie but locked it in a high school. He was like, all right, let's contain it, let's bring it in. And I think that's awesome because, again, there's many alien takeover movies that we've seen. Independence Day was huge. I
Right.
remember how big that was in pop culture, and you had this end of the world event where it's the entire world coming together and battling. And we can watch that again for sure. We can watch that again, but why watch that again? why not see it from a very small scale? And I wouldn't be surprised if Robert Rodriguez operated with the mindset of my favorite line in the movie. Would you blow up would you blow up the White House, Independence Day style, or would you sneak in through the back door? And that was his mentality for making this movie, and I thought it worked. It's got great horror elements, great sci-fi elements. I'm a huge sci-fi guy, as we know. Great comedic elements. There are some moments where the jokes come in and they don't take away anything from the scene, which can happen sometimes in a movie. You can watch a movie, whether it's horror, action, thriller, where a joke can kind of come in and kind of cut too much and you kind of lose tension and everything else. But there's moments in this movie that it lands organically, and I really enjoyed it. It's no secret that this is one of my favorite movies. I love watching it every year. I love the aspect of the identity, like who we are. Again, I almost every character in our core character group is either pretending to be something they're not, or the world is looking at them and saying, "Oh, this is you," and it's actually not them. Again, we talk about Zeke being the loner, right? He's a loner. He stays to himself because his parents kind of abandon him. They leave, they go on vacations, they go to Europe, they do this, they do that, and you think he's just this troublemaker. He's like, he's actually a really brilliant kid. You know what I mean? He's just dealing with all that inner turmoil with the parents and whatnot. Delilah, Stan, Stokely, like everyone's kind of like hiding who they are, and you get to see the real them at the end. Again, Zeke at the end of the movie joining a team is pretty great. He's joining a team. He's working on a team. And I like that Robert Rodriguez explored that, where he's like, all right, let's make a movie about aliens that take over people and change their dynamics and who they are, and let's actually make that a core theme. And what a perfect place, like high school, where we know that in high school there's these social standards. Sometimes people pretend to be something that they're not in order to fit in. It stinks, but it happens. And a lot of times it's not until people leave high school where they kind of decide to be themselves, because they don't feel that pressure of high school anymore. So the idea of Robert being like, alien invasion movie, take over your personalities. What's a place where we're all battling personalities and who we are and who we're supposed to be, other than high school? And I thought that was a really great take. So every year, this is on my Halloween rotation. It's one of my favorite horror movies, one of my favorite sci-fi horror movies, if you will. It's got everything I like in it, and I will watch it yearly, time and time again. And I hope that people keep discovering it. I really do. I hope that there's people that were born in the late 2000s that are kind of like, what's this movie, The Faculty? Because I'm like, you got to get your hands on it. You got to watch it.
Well, I haven't watched this in a while, so clearly, I wanted to watch this so we could sit down and do a breakdown for it. And my final takeaway is something you touched on while we were talking about it. There was a lot of scenes where there were group shots, where we had to focus on whoever was in the foreground, but there was a great use of the background actors, the extras. And there was always something interesting going on in the background.
Yes.
We had the one couple that was always arguing, and then all of a sudden they're getting along. We have all the cliques. We just have all these groups of people, the students, and there's always something going on. And if you remember, once the school started getting taken over, everyone got quiet and like stared at them as they were trying to leave. And it was just like, and then the football team is like, "Hey man, you guys," like, no, we got to go, So I just really enjoyed the use of the background actors and the crowds and such, and like to your point, it's that's really cool. Like even in that big crowd of people, these kids who are trying to figure out who they are, they stood out because they were just themselves. If they weren't themselves, they wouldn't have gotten out of the situation. So good stuff. Alrighty, folks. That was the Panel Bros official breakdown for The Faculty. If you could please give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at The Panel Bros, we'd appreciate it. Also, if you could let us know how you felt about The Faculty in the comments below, we'd appreciate that as well. Folks, please stick around. We have some more horror movies for you as we close out spooky season 2024. In the meantime, this is Anderson Marchak for Ricardo Segura saying thank you for coming to the panel.